Thank you, Michael. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and is within the territory of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. Thank you.
Thank you, Nassim. So welcome and thank you again for participating. This first session, agenda item number 1, is 522 University Avenue, and it is its second review. It's a rezoning and site plan application, as I mentioned, a second review. There's 1 hour and 30 minutes scheduled for the review. It's a formal review session, and there will be a vote taken at the end. Staff have 15 minutes for their presentation. The applicant has 20 minutes for their presentation. In each case, I will verbally interrupt you to let you know that there's 1 minute left to wrap up your material. Discussion will follow these two presentations. Session is being live streamed on YouTube and also being recorded. Recording will be available on the City of Toronto YouTube channel following the meeting. Members, I'm going to have a roll call now, and the intent is to understand if your audio and video is working and if you have a conflict of interest. So starting with you, Eladia.
No conflict.
Thank you. Gordon.
Here, no conflict.
Anna.
Present, no conflict.
Heather.
Here and no conflict.
Jessica.
Present, no conflict.
Juhi.
Here, no conflict.
Paul.
Here, no conflict.
Have I missed anyone from the design review panel? Good. So with that, we will begin the city presentation. Panel members, you should be listening with the city's and planning's questions in mind. So starting now, we have an opportunity for the city presentation. You have 15 minutes. You could introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Michael. I'm first going to share my screen here. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Nassim Adab. I'm with City Planning Urban Design, and with me I have Susan McAlpin, the community planner of this development application, as well as Erin Smith from Heritage Planning. This is our second DRP session for 522 University, and as you know, the application is for a proposed tower with an overall height of 231 meters and 64 stories. It will be located on top of an existing office building, which is 64 meters and 14 stories in height. The proposed development will be a mixed-use building with office, retail, and residential uses, and the total FSI will be 22.7. 564 residential units have been proposed, and there will be 60 parking spaces and 630 bike parking. The site is located within downtown and central waterfront area, and the as-of-right zoning is CR with a maximum allowable height of 76 meters. 522 University is designated as mixed use in the official plan, and as you can see, it is very close to many institutional lands. The site is also close to a number of existing surface and underground transit lines and transit stops, including the University Avenue subway line and College and Dundas Street streetcar lines. It is located on the southwest corner of University Avenue and Elm Street. It has 3 main frontages ranging from 38 meters to 62 meters, and it is about 2,400 square meters in size. I will now go through a couple of bird's eye views to better understand the context and the character of the area. This is a view looking northwest, identifying many important health and science related buildings, as well as the Ontario Legislative Building, and the subject site has been identified with the red boundary. Another view from the opposite angle shows the prominent typology and build form that contribute to the defining character of University Avenue. As previously mentioned, the tower is proposed to be located on top of an existing building, which has heritage attributes. This building was built in 1972 for National Life Assurance and was designed by renowned modernist architect John C. Parking. The property has been identified by the city as having cultural heritage value and is characterized by the treatment of all four elevations with a gridded concrete frame above a colonnade of concrete columns. A heritage impact assessment has been requested, and I should also mention that the site is subject to the view corridor, which protects the City Hall silhouette as viewed from the north sidewalk of Queen Street, and I will provide more details on that later. The existing 14-story building is characterized by the depth of its punched windows, robust columns and materiality, which is precast concrete. The building is attached to a two-story component on the south side of the property, which I'm showing here with my cursor. And as you know, this two-story building is a part of the subject site, which stretches from University Avenue to Simcoe Street. And here is a close-up view of it. The picture to the left is taken from University looking up, and the other one is taken from Simcoe Street looking east. As a reminder, the site is located within a context that is rapidly getting intensified. There are a number of towers already built on University Avenue. There's also a concentration of modernist architecture, which contribute to the ceremonial character of this corridor. And some views that clearly demonstrate the symmetrical character of Parkins building and its robustness from different location and vantage points. And they have been taken from University Avenue, Elm Street, and Richmond and University Avenue intersection. As discussed previously, the existing building is an interesting combination of different layers and attributes. And here is the boundary of the site, starting with the footprint of the ground floor and columns. Under the building, there is a semi-covered plaza, which is a combination of hardscape and planters. The plaza is sitting above the street level on all sides, which we will show in the following pictures. To access the plaza and enter the building, users need to walk up the stairs that are shown here with the yellow color, or they need to use the ramps shown with the orange arrows. The access to underground parking and loading area is on the south side of the property and along Simcoe Street, shown here with the blue arrow. And finally, the building sits on top of this open space with very robust columns. Other important features of the building, which we talked about, include the articulation of the soffit, the coffered ceiling, and the glass box, which gives a floating sensation below the concrete building. These views have been taken from University Avenue and show the great change from the sidewalk zone to the open space plaza. On the north side of the street, which you can see on the right in the right picture, there is a ramp that leads people to the plaza as well as to the entrance of the building. And the applicant's design team suggested redirecting it to Elm Street for better accessibility. Other street views from Simcoe Street show the existing streetscape condition and the relationship of the building edge with the public realm. There's also a second ramp along Simcoe Street that leads to the plaza and is shown here with the yellow arrow. Some views looking west on Elm Street showing the planters and bike racks on the sidewalk zone. The picture to the left has been taken from the open space, which shows how much it sits above the street level. The next few pictures focus on the landscape features in the plaza. Some of the planters are bigger with more vegetation, and some are narrower, but all have a similar design language. On the ground floor and along the edges of the building, there are retail spaces which set back from the property line, and you can see one of them here in the picture to the right. Moving to the discussion of planning policies, City uses many planning policies and framework to ensure the delivery of good planning and healthy and complete communities. These documents include the Ontario Planning Legislation, Provincial Policy Statement, and Places to Grow, And one of the most important documents that we use is the official plan that provides direction with respect to heritage conservation, land use, built form, and public realm. But for now, I'm going to highlight one of the important key policies that is related to the view corridor. This policy elaborates on the importance of Queen's Park Legislative Assembly, Old City Hall, and New City Hall as important sites with great prominence, and therefore any visible intrusion behind the silhouette of these buildings should be prevented. Additionally, the view to the building should be protected from any obstruction. Since the site is located within downtown area, many of the downtown plan policies will also apply. I will go through them very quickly. Starting with the Health and Science District, the policies talk about non-residential uses within this district to support institutional growth, and that buildings should create appropriate physical connections to contribute to the district's ability to share resources, facilities, and technology. There are also some policy directions regarding the importance of public realm expansion and enhancements. The site is within mixed-use area 1, which means there will be a diverse range of building typologies, including tall buildings, depending on the site characteristics. It also emphasizes on the importance of non-residential uses. Based on the downtown plan, there are many some protected parks in the close vicinity. However, there will be no shadow impact on those parks and open spaces coming from the proposed development. And finally, the subject site is along a designated grade street, which in this case is University Avenue. And based on these policies, the development will enhance the civic role of such streets and improve mobility. Public realm improvements will create a unified streetscape that identifies the character and heritage value of each segment and improve the scale of pedestrian clearway and public gatherings and prioritize tree planting. There are also a number of important guideline documents that City uses to evaluate a design proposal, including but not limited to tall building design guidelines, growing up guidelines, and pet-friendly guidelines. Using these planning frameworks and performance standards by both internal and external teams, University Avenue has already seen and will see a great level of intensification. Some of these approved, constructed, or under review and appeal tall buildings include 480 and 426 University Avenue, 481 and 505 University Avenue. And you can see their location with the blue color on the key map to the right. 200 and 250 University Avenue, and finally 700 University Avenue, which is a bit further from the side at the intersection of College and University Avenue. I will now provide a quick overview of the proposal that was brought to DRP session back in November 2023, starting with the Heritage Building. The applicants team talked about the Heritage Building, its conservation and approach to intervention. Parts of the building was proposed to be retained and some areas were proposed to be reconstructed or removed. The retention of the 60% of interior and exterior of the building will also help with minimizing the carbon footprint. There were some comments from panel members regarding the materiality of the reconstructed part and how it can celebrate and pay homage to J.C. Parkin's building. Above the existing building, there sits the tower. The location of the tower is directed to some extent by the conservation of the heritage building. And there were some discussions around the design solutions and how to create a harmonious relationship between the tower and the existing heritage attributes. I should also mention that the office component includes the base, meaning the existing building, and the backdrop that you see in this rendering, which is a new addition. In terms of public realm, we received comments from panel members regarding the streetscape and open space plaza. The proposed design looked at relocating some of the stairs as well as one of the ramps, but keeping the parking and service access in the same location. It also considered opening up the edges of the site to provide more greenery, sense of openness, and sitting places as shown in the next few slides. The proposed improvements also include the curb realignment along Elm Street, as well as new trees and bike lane along University Avenue. This is a view from University Avenue looking north, and the proposed changes show the improvement with sitting places, tree planting zone, pedestrian clearway, and more vegetation, as well as the bike lane. Another view looking south on University Avenue, showing the grade change from the sidewalk zone. And again, the proposed improvements show the openness, the seating places, and more greenery. Simcoe Street looking north and the proposed design showing more greenery. Just a reminder, these are all from the previous package that was submitted by the applicant's team. And a view to Elm Street looking west, showing the new stairs, planters, and sidewalk conditions. And lastly, the applicant's design team talked about sustainability approach and how high degrees of TGS and minimizing embodied carbon can be achieved through the conservation of the existing building, orientation of the new tower, wall-to-window ratio, green roof material, and energy performance methods, to name a few. With that, I can now move to the issues of focus. We would like to seek panel's opinion about the following issues of focus. The conservation strategy in relation to the significance of the existing heritage building on University Avenue as a civic corridor, the conservation strategy for the existing heritage building in relation to embodied carbon and other sustainability strategies in general, public realm, ground floor plane, street edge and sidewalk conditions, treatment, activation, and accessibility of the plaza and its relationship with the proposed uses, materiality and treatment of south end of the existing building, and the last one, design relationship of the new tower with the existing heritage building, its attributes and character, and in the context of University Avenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nasim. Very, very prompt and clear presentation.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to the consultant presentation. And once again, you have 20 minutes, and I'll signal that it's time to wrap up at the 19-minute mark. If you could introduce yourself and your team.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicola Casciato, Principal Design at WZMH Architects. I will be leading the presentation today. With me, co-presenter Sharon from ERA Architects. She'll be talking a little bit about the heritage components and characters of the building. And can everyone see my screen? Yep, great, thank you. So good afternoon. Nasim, thank you for the detailed review, and I'll move forward from there. So Nasim really well described the overall building, so I won't go over it from a overall standpoint. Talked about the contextual relationships, the relevant policies, some of our sustainability features, and the heritage considerations. We've talked about that. Now, one thing that when we read through the minutes the last time, we just wanted to clarify, exactly which pieces of the building are coming down and how we're addressing it, because there may have been some clarification that's needed. The existing building is in our diagrammatically is on the left under number 1, existing conditions. That's a rectangle building that Parkin designed, and it has 4 major columns along University Avenue and Simcoe Street, and then 3 major columns along Elm Street. The portion that we are demolishing to make way for the new tower is the portion that's hatched in red, and it's roughly around the 3rd column from Elm Street. And once we do that and we design the building and reconstruct a portion of it, we actually reconstruct a portion of it in the exact same footprint that of what we demolished. So it's the same footprint of what we demolished, and then we have a small podium that's required to hold up the tower that we're putting on top that you see in the background here. And that's the part that in our renderings, it's colored in that orange color. So we call that the backdrop. And just to remind everyone, you know, we worked very diligently with the city and with ERA and with RJC to get a solution that allowed us to put a tower over top of the existing building and still keeping the best parts of the existing building, but having a sensible structure that starts from the top of the building and meets the ground. So we're trying to avoid major transfers and exoskeletons and things like that, things that are carbon intensive. We're actually bringing our major strong walls right to the ground. And we're really pleased with that because from a carbon standpoint, that makes sense. So the next two slides, I'm going to hand over to Sharon from ERA. And then after that, I'll pick up and address the issues that were brought up in the last design review panel. So Sharon.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. So Sharon Hong from ERA, I'm planning associate here. Pleased to be coming before you again on this project. So as Nicola said, with ERA as the heritage consultant on the team, we worked collaboratively with WZMH and RJC to get to a place where some of the key moves of the design is driven by its response to and inspired by the key character defining attributes of the building designed by John C. Parkin. So firstly, there's that open ground floor plane speaking to this democratic modernity of the Parkin design with the indoor-outdoor fluidity expressed through details like this coffered ceiling treatment. Secondly, this open ground floor plane itself function as this extension of the public realm and its prominent situation on University Avenue with the monumental columns framing University Avenue as this grand ceremonial boulevard. And then there's the building on top itself expressing this uniform geometric grid of precast concrete, which is actually by Beer Precast. They played an important role in building concrete modernist Toronto. They also worked with Parkin at New City Hall as well. So moving to the next slide, just to reiterate that the proposal's heritage strategy responds to these attributes, and Nicola will elaborate in detail of how the proposal enhances the flow through outdoor plaza condition that's true to the original design intent, with edits to this raised modernist platform that engages with University Avenue and enhances its accessibility. And the existing building also plays a key component in the overall sustainability strategy of the project. It's actually a sophisticated system that integrates the concrete cladding with the structure. It's what led us to conserve 2/3 of the entirety of the existing building. So although we're removing that southern portion from those two southern columns, the remainder of the building will be retained. It ends up being a significant amount of existing material and embodied carbon, and the remainder of the building is left structurally distinct from the new tower. And then the southern bays and column, how they're reconstructed is very much paying homage to the historic Beaux-Arts context of University Avenue. And the limestone materiality of the Beaux-Arts context, which pays homage to the historic context, but also distinguishes it from the existing building.
Thanks, Sharon. So I won't read this extensive list here because I've provided it for you, but by and large, when we read through the minutes, there were these themes that came out, and we picked on some of these issues, and we've addressed them in our presentation, starting with the streetscape, the public realm and plaza. You'll see a little bit more development on the public realm, and in particular in the covered space below. On that respect, our approach has always been about engagement, about trying to engage University Avenue, Simcoe, Elm Street, because as it stands, the existing building really doesn't do that. It actually has it's almost like a barrier that's been placed on the podium level. But our approach is engagement. And so we're basically deconstructing a lot of those planters that were there, reconstructing them in a way that people can inhabit them. And you'll see that realm now. We've developed the covered plaza, which I'll show you in a few minutes, that engages as well. There was a comment on the accessibility ramp, and we tried really hard to reorient it. Right now, if we were to reverse its flow, as was suggested in the minutes, it becomes too long and it doesn't fit in between the two columns, and it would have to have an additional landing and so on and so forth. So we kept it in its current configuration, which we're happy with. As you come up the ramp, actually, and you're finished at the top of the ramp, you actually get this beautiful view down University Avenue. So we're happy with that experience. There's been some work done to the southern plaza and its edges. We've created a little bit more animation and some more seating area in that space. We've done more work on the facade, on how we're knitting together our new facade with the heritage facade, and also with the actually large column that's being removed and then being reconstructed. We looked very closely at the grid of the tower and how that's being detailed and the materials that we're using there. And then we've also looked at the roof garden level. We went back to our wind report and we looked at wind mitigation measures up there, how we're inhabiting that plaza, that terrace, how the wind is being dealt with in that area. And then in the overall tower materiality and the detailing of the frame expression, and then some updates on our sustainability strategies that we've been elaborating on as we go through our design process. So from a site planning standpoint, Nasim mentioned, where we are. I won't go through this too much, except to show that we've actually developed the roof terrace in greater detail. And I'll talk about our site plan just to give you one update on our public realm. If you've been to the site recently, you'll know that the University Avenue is currently under construction, and they're actually building this bike lane now. And they're building it to what you see here, which is roughly a 5.7 meter right of way from our property line to the curb of the bike lane. 3.7 of that is a clear sidewalk width, and the remaining 2 meters is taken up by a planter and a buffer strip between the planter and the bike lane. So that's the current configuration that's being constructed now. A little bit about the ground floor plan. On the University side, we have the entrance to the office, which is number 2, and then we have the lobby to the residential, which is number 3. And number 1 is that covered outdoor space that we talked about. You saw the pictures that Nasim showed with the planters. It's an uninhabited space for the most part. Every time I've been down there, there's really nobody underneath there. And we want to change that. We want to make that an engaging space. So we face the 2 entrances to our residential and office onto the plaza. We again take the planter that's there, deconstruct it, turn it into fun seating areas and animated seating areas. And then we make something of the solid wall that's on that faces north here onto the plaza to really animate that space even further. The one thing that Nasim noticed is that our original staircase to the building is here between columns 2 and 3. We've moved it to here to really play on that flow through, the flow through aspect that Parkin had in the original design, which was a flow through lobby. We can't do a flow through lobby because we've got 2 different uses now, but we do have a flow through plaza that I believe is could be quite nice and animated. Number 4 represents retail. With all the strong walls and columns coming down, we were able to create a clean retail space that faces the plaza that's elevated from University Avenue. And then on the Simcoe Street, if you've been to the site, you'll know that the loading area and the ramp area are accessed from there. And we're almost not changing that configuration. We have a ramp and loading that come in from Simcoe Street, and that's remaining almost as is. It's slightly different, but almost as is. On Elm Street, number 13, we've created a new curb outline to reduce the pedestrian crosswalk along Simcoe Street, which is quite wide at this point. The public realm improvements, this is a three-dimensional diagram of that ground floor that we're talking about. You see the office lobby here and the residential lobby on the other side, on the Simcoe Street side, with the animated plaza or covered, protected outdoor space here, showing our, deconstruction of those planters and turning them into these seating areas where you can wait for someone or have conversation, wait, and those kind of things under the building. Along University Avenue, we've got the existing planters and walls. We've deconstructed those to create them in habitable seating areas. And Elm Street, I think we've done some great improvements to the sidewalk in Elm Street, introducing a bike lane and some trees. The left images show what it looks like today, and you can see what I'm talking about with that high wall that's providing this barrier to the building and to the plaza itself. This section really demonstrates the mixed-use character of this building, residential on top, the amenity floors on top of the existing building, the existing office building that we're retaining, the suspended second floor space, which is located here, and then the ground floor lobby area. And you'll notice on our section, we're now looking at a little bit higher screens for the wind mitigation on the terrace level, and a large canopy that prevents that downwash of wind from the tower. But as we talked through with our wind engineer, our facade is quite articulated, and so that in and of itself helps to break down the downwash of the winds onto the terrace as well. Looking north on University Avenue sidewalk, you'll start to see some of the things that we advanced on, in particular in the South Plaza. We've introduced some public art in this area. We've introduced more seating area as an extension of the seating areas that are happening further north. Going up to that terrace level or the retail level, we've introduced some stairs there and seating areas next to it. And you can just also start to see some of the material quality that we're envisioning for the new portion of the facade that's knitting with the existing building. And we're proposing a limestone as a use in there. And we find that quite interesting because we think that Parkin used the smooth precast concrete to actually mimic limestone. I think we want to introduce limestone now to mimic the precast concrete. And we feel that that's a really nice way to tie it into the University Avenue as well. Our public realm remains relatively the same as what we presented last time, 3.7 meters wide, planters, a buffer, and then the bike lanes. Looking south on University Avenue, you can now see that the public, the plaza that we animated on the south, there's a public art component that we're placing in this area here. And we also know that there's currently a public art component over top on the existing building next door to us, a Terry Fox image that's been painted on top of there, right about to that level there. So we're not interfering with that artwork, in case anyone's wondering. The upper plaza, of course, right now, the existing condition that Parkin left us with this very transparent lobby, office lobby that we are picking up on, and we want to actually make even more clear by introducing glass fins as a support to our curtain wall, and the floating box that is up above. That's one of the things that we love the most about this building. We really want to retain that and play up on that. Looking into the covered plaza from University Avenue, you can see that porosity that we're creating through the site and really inviting people up to that plaza level, and looking at really creating an opportunity for an engaging art piece underneath that space. And it could be this wonderful sort of landscape that's being projected onto a screen to really warm up that space. Of course, we're in downtown Toronto, a lot of concrete and steel, and we want to introduce more greenery, more images, but in a way that's playful and something that introduces public art into the space. Looking north on Simcoe Street, the far right is where our loading area is just cut off, where these two people are here. But on the Simcoe Street, we would use the same approach as we did on University Avenue with the facade by introducing smooth limestone and then reconstructing that column with limestone as well. Looking south into the covered plaza from Elm Street, one of the things we do like about that facade is currently it's fairly porous when you look at it from the Elm Street facade, and we want to play up on that. And so this is where we've introduced the ramp onto the left because it's the shortest possible ramp that we can get, and we think it's nice to have people when they come up the ramp, they're actually facing University Avenue, and then introducing this grand staircase into the residential component onto the right here. And then in the middle, just behind that column, we're looking at an art feature that we can place on that wall. From the University Avenue street wall perspective, you can see all of our materials. The one thing to note, in case anyone's wondering, the addition that was when Parkin's original building actually went up to this line here, this datum, which is the soffit. The current configuration is 1x1 additional story. We thought that additional story was superficial. It didn't really tie in with the original design. So when we reconstruct this, we're actually dropping it down to the original datum, which is this line here, aligning with the tops of the monumental columns. But you can now see the distinguishing features between the precast facade by Parkin and our new facade knitted together with the limestone, introducing new joint lines, introducing new joint lines that distinguish it from the existing building, but still tying it together with the same proportions, same window openings. I talked a lot about our expression, and so we've advanced that quite a bit, both in imagery and in our floor plans. So now our floor plans match our elevations. And so there were some questions as to how the grid actually turns the corner. And so we've got that sorted out. We've created datums along each floor that are the same. And then as we turn the corner to the balconies, we actually adjust the sloping profile slightly just to allow for that balcony to work. Some details that are integrating the existing building with the new facade. You can see them here. We're using the same profiles. Parkin had a concrete column with a precast concrete, quite heavy precast concrete nosing, let's say. We're doing a thin limestone panel that is just attached in a very conventional way, I think, to a studded or a metal frame with the concrete columns behind it. And likewise, in the section, we're mimicking the sections of the existing profiles with limestone.
Nicola, you're coming. You've got just a few slides left. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, thanks.
Very good.
Michael.
Thank you.
So, and then here we have the gridded facade, and we've sorted out how we're venting with mechanical louvers. We've sorted out how we've created this nosing. We sorted out where the louvers happen on the facade itself to make it very, very consistent. And we've also looked at how the metal panel is actually being constructed. We think they'll be done in the fins will be done in 2-story lifts with these nosings being placed in between them. And likewise on the balcony section, a similar approach. And then I've spoken about materiality. We studied really what is the lightest material we can put on the building that, still gives us the look that we want and has the least amount of embodied carbon. I think metal panel turned out to be one of the better solutions for that because of its lightness, its flexibility in terms of design standpoint, and it still gives us that deep grid expression. In the connecting section or in this backdrop section, we're using a textured glass facade, and we're looking at various metal meshes that can be embedded in the glass to give us a very distinct look, but a very sort of background look. And then our introduction of the knitting the old facade with the new with limestone, we think is a very nice way to tie the two together. Now, those douse through some images here. We really love introducing some kind of art component that's related to nature and related to trees, something that really brings nature, albeit in an artistic form, underneath this plaza here. And again, deconstructing those planters to create them more as seating areas. A view from the public realm along Elm Street, and then our intersection of University and Elm, and then our overall view from the north. Now, just from the last couple of slides, from a sustainability standpoint, we are striving for more electrification of the building. We've got now 30% of our heating systems will be electric, and we're looking at partial electrification of the domestic hot water. Deep lake water cooling is still in the feasibility stage. We're looking very closely at that. We've limited our underground construction to 2 levels, which from a carbon footprint standpoint makes sense. I've mentioned how much we've saved by using the existing building. And then from a building orientation standpoint, we've now got kind of deep recesses to provide a lot of shading. Our balcony to wall floor ratio is about 39%. So we've got 39% balcony, and over 60% of it is non-balcony, but yet 8 of the 12 units still get balconies, and the other ones get Juliet balconies. We've got a fairly efficient wall to floor area ratio of about 0.436. A square is, well, round is the most efficient, but a square is just a little bit more efficient than this. So we're really pleased with that number in terms of what we have. We're identifying stack effect as something that we always look at in tall buildings, tall residential buildings. We'd have to study that even further to make sure that we're addressing it from a design standpoint in the early stages. And then one last point on the bottom right is what I mentioned before, structural continuity. So we've gone through great pains to make sure that our strong walls go right down to the ground, so we're not creating inefficient, structures and diagrids that that involve a lot of carbon intensity. And thank you.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Panel members, we have 10 minutes for questions of clarification. So I'm going to put the list of participants up on my screen, and I'm going to look for your virtual hands, and we'll go in the order that I see them. And the first hand that I see at the moment is Heather.
Thank you. I just have a number of, I think, quick questions. The canopy that's been introduced at the podium roof, is this partly required for wind mitigation and downwash from the tower?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're nodding yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then the materiality of the soffit underneath the residential tower, is it also metal?
It's metal panel, and you may have
The-
noticed on one of the slides the grid comes
I
through,
did.
yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then just quick confirmation that the balconies are only on the east and west sides
Correct.
of the tower.
Correct.
And it doesn't seem that balcony dividers have been shown yet. Looks like you're probably going to need 3 or
Yeah,
4, I think,
we'll
on
need
each
them.
side.
They will align with the grid, though. But
Yes.
yes, we'll need
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. And the height of the parapet or guard at the top of the existing / new
Mhm.
office building. It looks like there's a glass kind of backup to the precast
Yes.
/ limestone parapet.
Mhm.
If you could go please to page 23. I just want to concentrate on the new south? Yes, where the office building kind of dies into the copper curtain wall facade. So there was originally a negative corner at that building, which you're retaining, but then that little bit of south facade that will be limestone is now set back. And is it a bit shorter? And that's why we can see the glass beyond it? Or I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if you could just describe that detail. It's a question from the city, so I just wanted to
Yeah.
clearly understand it.
That's so. Thanks for pointing that out, Heather. I think there's a reentrant corner similar to what Parkin did on the north. Well, on all
Yeah.
four corners. So we've done that. We've replicated the reentrant corner. I actually think that I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not sure why we recessed it like that. We have to probably study that a little bit further. It could have been trying to meet a grid on the in the facade as well, but I would likely look at that as almost looking at the existing condition, which is a more of a flush condition. So a reentrant corner, and then we go back to a flush condition as we turn. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing that
Great.
out.
And sorry, one last question at the ground floor. There's a small section of ramp at the northwest corner. That it looks like it would meet a barrier-free slope, right? It's a very low slope right there, gentle.
This is a very low slope. The current slope, it does not meet AD. It's actually probably half of this length. We lengthened it. We actually had to lengthen it. The current, if you go look at the current one, it's actually smaller and it's shallower. So we've lengthened it to the back of the column here just to align it with the back of the column.
I see. Okay. And then are there handrails in there, or just a single one?
We're hoping that the slopes don't require it. There should be just one on that side there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Looking for other raised actual or virtual hands. See no virtual hands right now in my list. Then we can, I'll just give it another minute. If there are questions of clarification. Paul, I knew it. I gave it a minute. Paul, go ahead.
Couldn't let the quiet stand. Very simple question. If you could just clarify the second floor where there's the sort of let's call it the mezzanine that exists under the larger portico. There appears to be a bit of an open space to the lobby below. If you could maybe just clarify what's proposed there. It's sort of shown as generic blue office space, but if there's some other thoughts about how that could be programmed at this time, just curious where we're at.
So you're talking about, Paul, you're talking about this space here?
Correct, yeah, that level.
So we feel that is one of the features of the building. Right now, when you walk the building, the coffers have been covered over. They're exposed on the soffit, but they're covered over in the interior space. When we look at the original reflected ceiling plan, Parkin had it going all the way through. And so that's the one thing that we want to retain and reinstate, to bring those coffers all the way through. They may be under the ceiling tile, I'm not sure, but they were certainly on the reflected ceiling plan drawn all the way across. The one issue with that space, in fact, I was just at an event in that space last week. It doesn't have a great floor to floor height. It's a very compressed space. So I wouldn't suggest office in that space. That seems to me more like a sort of an intimate event space or like a high-end restaurant type space. I'm not sure I wouldn't recommend office in that area. I would look at that as more of a part of the public realm and make that more engaging as a space.
But just to clarify, that decision hasn't been made. It'll be sometime down the road as far as the actual use or tenant.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Paul. Well, I'm going to use my opportunity as chair to ask a few questions. These are kind of yes/no questions. In the ground floor, under the floating second floor, you've got a mail room with a decorative screen. Is there any opportunity to consider changing the height of that space so that the second floor slab that we're seeing in this view could actually be expressed as floating? That's that area there where your cursor just was, on that north side. Sorry, not there.
Nope.
Or there.
Oh, north side here.
North
Yeah.
side there. So you've got an ornamental wall finish or decorative wall finish there to make something a virtue out of a necessity. Is there any chance to change the volume so that that expression could be of the cantilevered or floating floor be complete? And is I guess the question is, could that be studied?
So in this area here,
Correct.
this is so currently this is a solid wall. It's got there's an elevator behind this wall actually.
Okay.
That services the lower level. So we're keeping that elevator right now.
Okay, that's clear.
But yeah.
Okay. Second thing is any chance of there being coffers on the tower soffit?
Yeah, we are still studying that. We right now we've looked at a very simple grid. When we studied coffers up there, and maybe we got to do it again. When we studied coffers up there, they looked a little bit out of place in here, but there might be a way to do something there that interprets the coffers in a different way.
And maybe just
Because it doesn't, it's not a complete, where we end up on a half module. That's part of the issue, I think. But yeah, that's something that we're still studying.
Is there a chance, I'll continue with these yes/no questions. Is there a chance in the beam that connects the massive monumental columns, there's an articulation that receives the column tops toward the north? In the drawings you did toward the south, you didn't echo that detailing. Is there a chance to continue that?
Yes.
Reveal lines and so on.
Yes.
And then finally, maybe the metal finish. Right now we've got precast as the existing, and we've got metal as the new. I'm assuming there are lots of opportunities to have the metal be not necessarily shiny, but have a range of possible textures that would fulfill the objective there.
Yes. We would. We're studying the metal panel. Yes, we are.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for those quick answers. Panel, we're now in a position to enter the period of panel discussion. So I'm going to provide you with an order that where you can anticipate your comments. So I'm going to start with Anna. Anna, are you there? So Anna, Heather, Paul, Eladia. And then the next group is going to be Jessica, Juhi, and Gordon. So starting with you, Anna.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate the effort and the change that's been made since we last saw this. I think there has been some consideration of our comments, so I do appreciate the movement that's been made. So I have some detailed comments just on the south end of the building. I think, again, the change to carry that form and the materiality of the existing building through to the corner and to curl it around back to that gold element is very successful. And that was a change from your last, pardon me, proposal. However, I think the success of it will really rest in the very fine detailing of it. So there's just three kind of areas there that I think are important. The first are the joints of the limestone. I believe it's limestone on the facade. There you can see very obviously on the elevation that you have on page 7 that the joints are different than the existing configuration. And I think that's because it's that the thinner limestone likely than the limestone that's used on the other facade. So I think that deserves a bit of consideration because, you know, if you've worked so hard to have that element maintain its original beauty, I think the detailing should reflect that as well. Where the gold element coming down to the ground. So this is a perfect image meets the ground. I think where those two planes meet, you're showing the gold meeting the clear glazing in the same plane, in not the middle of the retail unit, but close to the middle of the retail unit. I think there's an opportunity there to express the original podium, because you did talk a little bit about how the original podium height was met. Yes, that's it. So when, if you go back to the elevation, you can see the original podium where you've kind of got that lined material. So if you were to carry that line through to the existing building, consider the materiality there, make the retail unit whole, I think it might hang together better at the base. Like, I don't agree, like, I do agree that when zoomed out, that gold element sliding to the ground is quite beautiful. However, when you're at grade and walking along University Avenue, I think if you express that podium sliding out in the way it was done in the original configuration, it might speak better to the pedestrian and to kind of the urban edge there on University. And then quickly, where the gold tower, where the new tower sits on the gold tower, again, it's just an area of interest where the two meet. It's shown quite delicately right now, where they just this really gentle hovering of a white block above a gold block. Yes, that's it. So I would just question how that is going to be executed in a way that satisfies that very clear design intent. So I think, and then there's just a few other comments just on the new tower, the materiality, the metal boxes, which are quite beautiful, you know, the punch, they're deep. Again, just questioning the reality of that and how it will be executed. White is a tough color in metal. It doesn't stay clean easily. So I think to Michael's point about, is it glossy? Is it, you know, I would add, how does it repel dirt? Is that possible? And also to consider window washing, because if people have to drop down and wash those windows, is that depth going to work with the equipment that the condominium has to use at the end of the day? And then just one more comment on the public realm piece at the ground floor, where you have three uses. So you've got retail, office, and residential. And it's really hard to distinguish on the elevation those different uses. So a few suggestions there. I think we talked about the retail and that box and how that box might be able to help you express the retail at the base. Sorry, the existing line of that podium. And the plaza that's outside. So you've got the resi and the office both feeding onto that plaza. Now, it's kind of a hierarchy question. So the address is 522 University Avenue. And currently the only entrance you have facing University Avenue is that small residential unit. So, you know, is there a way for the office, even if you move the office entrance to the corner, so it could address both the plaza and University Avenue, is there a way for that to kind of interact with University Avenue? And then that leaves Elm Street for the residential expression. And that, you know, that piece can feed out onto, you know, Elm Street, and it can give, you know, a fairly significant residential address its own place to exist. And last point, which is a small one. Actually, I have two more points, sorry. The ramp, what you've done with the accessibility is great. Just consider that space between the column and the end of the ramp there. It's very, very tight. And, you know, that is a main entrance. People with strollers coming down there, you know, like there's a lot of uses for that ramp. So just think about that. And then I'll end with an appreciation for the changes to the terrace to improve the wind on that terrace, because again, with 500 units in that building, that's a large public space for the residents of that building. So livability, I think, is very important. So I think the same consideration for sun, which was the other element that will be very harsh on that terrace, could be considered as well. But that's it. But thank you for the changes that you've made based on our original comments and for your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. And panel members, neglected to just give a bit of guidance on timing. So if you could self-manage to 4 or 5 minutes, that'll help us all get comments in. So next on the list is Heather.
Great, thank you. First of all, I commend the kind of selective demolition that's being done on the office, and just the sort of general goals and attitude of the project to retain what appears to be as much as possible. It's something that is quite rare that we see on the panel. And a quick shout out to Sharon on pages 6 and 7. The kind of character defining attributes of the building, I think, are very well studied, and it's something that we also don't often see. I was happy to hear some of the answers that were given on the detailing of the building, because I think, you know, this is an exercise in very kind of quiet simplicity, and as Anna said, the execution of these details is very, very important. So I would say, you know, taking a deeper dive and second look at the soffit and the seaming in that, which I know is on your radar. Also the kind of termination and where the new limestone facade folds in, you know, some of those questions about the negative corner and whether you inset that bit of facade or not, and how it lines up with the floor to floor heights beyond in that copper colored volume. I think again, we're probably on the same page, but erring on the side of more simplicity probably. And I agree with Anna's comments about more closely matching the original with respect to joints, etc. I think already the change in material will probably likely be enough to give it that very subtle distinction that I think you're looking for between old and new. I also think that the improvements along Elm Street are welcomed and will be great improvements. And I agree with the relocation of the barrier-free ramp, and generally, I generally agree with the programming and entrances for the building. I do think the kind of original intention of that plinth on the north was that it be more of a kind of civic porch for the building, and I think that might be why there weren't as many access points, you know, down to the ground, and it felt more like a plinth. But I think given the increase in uses and you know, multiple you know, and just our cities maturing and this idea of porosity, I think actually allowing more ways to kind of I guess navigate that plinth is a good idea. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Excuse me. Next, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I'm probably going to riff right where Heather left off and focus on some of those elements of the plinth, the porch, and the programming, let's say. Just before I do that, I think it's worth highlighting that, you know, it's a ambitious proposal. The preservation of the office, both from a carbon perspective and as a use that delivers mixed uses, to be commended. The evolution is sort of clear and addressed pretty much all of the comments that we had. And so I just wanted to be positive in my feedback about that. But to kind of focus on, I think the programming primarily is sort of where I'm at. And I think there's a risk that this becomes a highly policed, sterile porch or plinth, or an opportunity that it becomes a kind of central community space and acts to connect the various uses from both the office, the residential, but also the passersby. And I know you're sort of limited as maybe designers, given the client's not ready to make those commitments, but I think you're on the right track about that sort of mezzanine and the programming of that as an event space or something non-standard. I think tying that back down to the porch, maybe programmatically through commercial, some kind of hospitality use that can operate both morning, afternoons, and into the evenings. It's not an easy sort of thing to curate, and I think curating is what it needs. And so finding maybe simply putting a coffee shop in there may not be enough, and finding a kind of tenant that can sort of a landlord that can maybe manage those various uses throughout the day, in the way that, perhaps maybe the Queen and Richmond Center is sort of the most recent kind of example of a kind of successful semi-public space that it acts as a lobby, has a kind of day-to-day function as a coffee shop, place of intersection, is sort of a semi-public space, but also supports the larger special events on occasion, and finding that right mix of things for this would work. I think Michael's comments about maybe taking the mail room and pulling it down and sort of revealing some of the architecture, making some, even if they're just visual connections across the office and res lobbies, and then I think really working on that the mural that has the sort of trees on that facade, and making sure that it supports wherever you land on all those uses from a kind of lighting perspective, and kind of getting the mood right across the various points in the day is going to be very critical. So I think you're on the right track, and maybe this should be directed again at the landlord developer, but I think it is critical to kind of getting it to that final level of resolution. So much appreciated, and thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we're going to have Eladia.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. Since a lot has been said about heritage and treatment of the facade, I'm going to talk a little bit more about ground plane and vegetation. A great deal of the strength of this is humanizing and making more vibrant the main level. As you can see from the existing photos, it has been, as you say, a pretty abandoned public realm area. So these moves are, I applaud you on your concerted effort to make that more vibrant. One word, perhaps just in support of landscape architects, just be sure that the design team is really listening to them in terms of the health of plant communities, because street trees certainly have some trouble on the north side, and they're helped greatly by developing plant communities at their base. So anywhere you can make a contiguous plant life community, they'll do better because they're working together. It'll also create start to help reverse the perception of vegetation versus pavement, so that you feel like pavement is helping humans get into the vegetation, whereas oftentimes in public realm we see, the planters are helping vegetation get into the pavement, if you know what I mean. So trying to reverse that wherever possible. I know the city can be sticky about how much and where and what types of vegetation we're using, but do everything in our power, I think, to support that feeling of life. The other thing that I'm thinking is that North Plaza underneath the building is going to be quite dark and windy, especially in the winter months. So it might be very important for the design team to consider carefully what activities we're anticipating for those 6 to 8 months of the year where it's not going to be that warm and pleasant. How are we mitigating that condition? Is there perhaps even a really innovative way of reflecting some light back in under there, using some reflective surfaces that are taking some of the south light and catching it and reflecting it back, perhaps? Just because it's such a deep recess, and it is facing northwest and northeast, the source of many of the super problematic winds for Toronto winters. So while these gestures are really valuable, at the same time, just be very realistic about how those spaces will be used and how people will feel in them, especially temperature-wise, and whether they really are going to get used. Sort of how do we deal with those really problematic northeast winds? Things like that, I think, would be very important for sort of a considered gesture such as what I'm seeing. So I'll just leave it there because I'm sure lots of other people will have interesting ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Lydia. Next is Jessica, Juhi, and Gordon. So go ahead, Jessica.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate the clarity of your package. It was very easy to read. And you've probably already heard a lot about the building, so I'm going to focus again on the public realm here. And it's great to see the project come back to the panel. I took the old package and the new package and was really looking at what the subtle changes were at the ground floor. But I was pleased to see those were made. Sorry, one second. I was also pleased to see that you explored the ramp redirection, and I understand the challenges of grading on a site like this. It's you know, a very small amount can make a big change at either end. So a comment carried forward from the first review is just, I appreciate that seating on University. I think you've done a good job of sort of adding to it at that northern stair on University. The addition of the seating there just again adds to and reinforces that public edge. It would be interesting to see if there was a way also to accommodate space beside some of these seating elements for wheelchairs or mobility devices, somewhere you can, get off of or out of the clearway. The way you've broken up the small southern plaza by using 2 runs of stairs creates a sort of interesting semi-elevated space. It's sort of separated from the active street and sort of separated from the retail, but it's still sort of really engaging now with that piece of public art. So I think those changes work well. Unfortunately, it becomes an inaccessible space, which is not ideal, but with such an extreme grade change at that end, I doubt it can be made accessible. Also, I was glad to see you gave more thought to the plaza between the 2 lobbies. It's not quite working for me just yet. I think these playfully arranged cube extrusions are interesting, but to me they feel a bit foreign in relation to sort of this rigid grid of the park and building. And it's just such a critical point where almost every user of this building is going to walk through here. So I'm wondering if there's a way to, it's almost like, do you keep it really simple and in line with the grid, or do you just do something completely out of the box and it's a large reflective gold mound or a huge natural boulder rather? So I think it could get played with a bit, and I definitely echo Eladia's comments about the winter and shoulder season conditions in this space. And so how can something really creative happen in here that makes people, want to stay for a moment, whether it's the end of their day or they're getting home from work. And then finally, before my voice gives out, I think this desire to bring nature into the plaza space with the solid wall treatment is kind of a really fun juxtaposition, and that would really draw the eye in, maybe bring some sense of artificial light into the space. And so maybe if the landscape could kind of build off of that and sort of really create a holistic space in this area, I think that could bring quite a nice life to the space. That's it for my comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. Glad your voice lasted. Next, Juhi and then Gordon. Juhi, please.
Thank you. I really appreciate the design team's presentation. It was really clear that the comments from the panels previously were taken very seriously. It seems like each were tested, challenged, and further explored with this package, which was really great to see. I echo the previous panel members about the facade design. I like how a lot of the noise had been removed and the simplicity had been further explored and detailed in this package. In terms of sustainability, there are great measures that the project is proposing for embodied carbon, such as the preservation of the existing building, limiting the underground parking space, and really that continuous study of the structural system was really great to see. I really encourage the team to continue to explore opportunities for low carbon concrete into the procurement schedule now and really continue on that exploration. There's a really great start there. The project is currently meeting tier 1 of the TGS version 4. So I see from the package that low carbon heating systems are being explored. So please continue to focus on those measures that will lower the operational carbon emissions. And it is really critical that those are locked down early in the process. So just wanted to reemphasize that. This is a side note, but I actually really appreciated the city's presentation at the beginning. It was really well structured and clear to follow, not just on the heritage aspect, but also from the ground floor site condition of various levels, and really from various site views. I felt like it was really great to orient myself and understand the condition of the site when I haven't been there before. So just wanted to point that out as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Juhi. And finally, Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to second or third that motion about the city presentation. I think it was very well organized. It was comprehensive. It was a really nice touch that some of the images from the first review were brought forward, and it deserves to be applauded, because I think it's one of those exemplar moments in terms of presenting very completely and yet in a very succinct way all the information that the panel needs. It's interesting that a lot of the questions during the discussions have been very detailed questions and comments about this project, and I think that's actually a very good sign, because it means all the big moves are dancing with each other quite nicely, and all of the details based on the abilities of the design team are fully capable of being accomplished. This project, I think, along University Avenue is perhaps could become an exemplar in itself relative to how to sensitively add to existing buildings, and especially a building of this caliber. There have been a lot of projects that we've seen lately along University Avenue, and many of them have a very difficult and challenging relationship with combining new with existing. But this one is one that I think is successful due to the abilities of the design team, and then also the how can I put it, what Parkin had done originally to hand down to the next generation so many abilities of the building that are clearly being taken full advantage of. I'll move on to the plinth for a moment as an example. I visited the building in the past many times, and it had a very unusual relationship with the street. In one hand, it was inviting. It was perhaps the most inviting building along University Avenue, because it had this pavilion that sort of glowed underneath the building itself. It was sort of protected by the building, and then at the same time, it was sort of pushing you away because it had this wall edge around it. And I think all the efforts that you've gone to overcome that and humanize this this gesture that the original architect gave to the city is really very positive. And I think the comments that have come through so far about how to make sure that space is humanized, that it is inviting, because I do remember it as being interesting and intriguing, but also not very much alive. And I think those efforts that you're taking now are really good. And I think where it is at its deepest on the north side is perhaps going to be the one that's going to be challenging, that it actually feels like a space you want to go in and maybe spend some time in, as opposed to trying to get through it as quickly as possible. I think also what's really helpful here is that just to the north of this site, there's a whole precinct about health and wellness. And I think if you can carry that that notion of health and wellness that you're already starting to infuse into the platform of the building, and continue that. As an example, the stepped seating along University Avenue, all of those things are very positive changes. I want to thank you very much for the change in terms of how you've handled the existing building and trying to keep its completeness while you add to the new elements. And I think that's a really big thank you from us to you in terms of doing that, because that has really sort of cemented the relationship between existing and new. And really appreciate that the new is similar to the crisp, brutal building that is the existing one now, but it's different. It's lighter. It pays homage, but it's not a copy, and it's a very elegant combination that has occurred here. So I think those are the comments that I have. That looks as if the design team is fully capable of taking this to a really fine conclusion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gordon. And I'm not sure after your elegant summary of all the comments and inclusion of your own, what more is left to say other than perhaps that many of us around the table are familiar with the period in architecture where the modern movement and buildings like this were not fully appreciated, and we didn't always know what it was that wasn't working about them. However, what we're hearing, especially in the comments of the last few panel members, is that the approachability, the access, the livability, the humanizing and made vibrant of these plaza spaces is maybe a key to the success of this building. Without a doubt, all the other things that have been mentioned by panel members, including the response to the previous comments, the elegant and lightness of the tower above, the relation of the old to the new, the stitching together, those things have all been recorded, but the success of this outdoor space is the first encounter that everyone's going to have. And we've heard good things about the re-engineering of the stairs and ramps. We're hearing maybe uncertainty about the actual experience there with the landscape design or plaza design that's currently being shown. And perhaps one of the things that we've learned the most about the public edges at grade in buildings over the last 40 years is that they need to be active. And I'm looking at the axo now of that plaza and the buildings and representing the relationship of people inside the residential or the office lobby and outside that lobby, so that there's an anticipation that the edges will be active and therefore they will be more inviting than maybe they have been. So I would say I'm going to bring forward a few other comments on recognizing carbon emissions, low carbon concrete, understanding that talked about the plaza needing more thought. Interesting comments about contiguous plant life communities to be able to thrive on that north edge and the vibrance of that public realm on the north edge. We heard comments like a place that doesn't invite, there was a term highly policed, doesn't invite versus a central community space. And how does one convey how the lobby and that plaza, both lobbies and the plaza, can actually be reciprocal and helping each other thrive. We heard about how ambitious this project is and how addressing the comments was done so well. The changes to Elm Street being welcomed, but a closer consideration of the details when a project such as this, which is such a quiet simplicity. Quiet simplicity invites inspection of the details, like the soffits, like the joints, like the size of the panels. I think you're hearing from panel members that in response to the quiet simplicity, the attention given to every single joint, soffit, wall, transition is going to be heightened in this project, probably more so than any other. So the cliche is that God is in the details. This will be more true here. And as we discover more and more about Parkin's work, we know that they were masterful. And so this project is walking in the steps of a master, and the attention to those things that the panel members have brought up is going to be crucial to success. And I'll add one more. The relationship between the soffit of the tower and the top of the background building cannot be a missed opportunity where one intersects the other uncomfortably. They definitely need a pure formal relationship like the rest of the building. So with that, panel, we have an opportunity to remind ourselves of the key points that the city planning we're looking for, the conservation strategies in relation to heritage buildings, the conservation strategies relative to embodied carbon, the public realm, which we've talked about, the treatment and accessibility of the plaza, materiality and design relationship of the new tower to the heritage building. Those are the key points. On those points, we're being asked to vote. So, Leanne, if you could remind us of the definition of the vote.
The vote is intended to provide emphasis and clarity to the discussion and an indication of how well the project advances the panel's mandate of promoting design excellence. Support means that the panel advises that the design should continue and include refinements that were identified during the discussion. Support can be provided with a related condition or recommendation if so desired. Non-support means that panel advises that the project should be redesigned to address the issues that were identified during the discussion.
Thank you, Leanne. And just a further reminder that either vote is supported by all the comments that panel members have made. And they stand recorded and will be part of the final record of the meeting today. So I'm going to go down the list and in the same order as you provided your comments, and I'll ask you for a vote of support, non-support, or support with conditions. And I'll actually, before I do that, I will pause to see whether anyone wants to make, to include any conditions on the vote. Often that's done with an electronic raised hand. I'll give that a few seconds. Usually they're pretty prompt. Not seeing any raised hands now. Oh, I do. I'm sorry. A lady, I saw your hand up there briefly.
Apologies, I'm not sure actually what are we voting to support or not? Voting
Yeah,
to not support?
so I saw your hand up.
Attention for a moment.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I'll make that more clear. I'm gonna call on each of you individually and ask you to verbally say support or non-support. And then the second thing I was asking was, in a vote of support, we can sometimes have a condition. In other words, the panel is voting in support as long as something very important that hasn't already been mentioned or is mentioned and is really crucial to that member or to the panel would be there. But I'm going to leave that right now and say we're going to go to equivalent of the roll call, and then I'll ask you verbally for your vote of support or non-support. So starting with Anna.
Support.
And then Heather. And then Heather.
Heather had to step out,
think
but she voted in support.
Thank you. Paul. Hello, Paul.
You hear that? Support.
Thank you. Eladia.
Support.
Thank you. Jessica.
Support.
Juhi.
Support.
Gordon.
Support.
Thank you, panel members. Thank you to the proponent, the applicant team, your presentation, and we look forward to this project being fulfilled at the same level as mastery as the project you're working with. Panel, we're going to pause now at here we are, 2:40. The next presentation begins at
I think it's
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
And Gordon, you'll be taking that presentation.
Yes.
Thanks very much. See you in 20 minutes. Thanks, everyone. See you at 3 o'clock.
Leanne. Hi, do we have everybody from the city team here?
Believe so, yes.
Yes, okay. And I think everybody's back. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the second of the two sessions this afternoon. The project we're about to go through is the Renew Sheppard East study. That's the second time it's come before the panel. And we saw it, I think it was back in November of last year, so it's come back in a fairly short period of time. As an application, it's a city study, and I understand that presentations will be made by Sadaf and Mashid, and from urban design, and Jenny and Michael from community planning. And if I've mispronounced anybody's name, I apologize. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that this is going to be an hour and 30-minute session. And as I mentioned earlier, it is a formal review session, so all the comments will make their way to the study team, but there will be no vote taken at the end. And staff will have 25 minutes for their presentation, and I believe we'll have time for questions of clarification and then panel discussion. I just wanted to remind everybody that the session is being live streamed on YouTube, and it's also being recorded. And the recording would be available on the City of Toronto City Planning YouTube channel following the meeting. I'm going to move on now to roll call. And panel members, as I call your name, just confirm that you're here and let me know if you have any conflict of interest that would remove you from this discussion. I'm going to start with Jessica.
Present, no conflict.
Thanks, Jessica. Juhi?
Present, no conflict.
Thank you, Juhi. Eladia? I see you may be on mute, Eladia. Okay, I'll come back to Eladia. I do see her on the list, but not coming up. Michael?
Present, no conflict.
Thanks, Michael. Paul?
Present, no conflict.
Thanks very much, Paul. And back to Eladia. Eladia, I see that you're on mute. Just want to confirm if you're, I think you're back.
Aye, present and no conflict.
Great, thanks very much. And have I missed any other panel member? I'm not aware of. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Leanne, are there any other panel members that would be joining this afternoon?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, great. At that point, we'll get started. Again, for the city team, if you could just introduce yourselves, and you'll have a total of 25 minutes. At the 24-minute mark, I'll just sort of gently butt in and tell you that you have a minute to wrap up. And as soon as the presentation is up on the screen, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gordon. I will just share my screen right now.
That sounds good.
Okay, just once. Confirming that everyone can see my screen.
I can see it.
Great.
I'm hoping everybody else can.
Okay. Great. Well,
the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello and good afternoon, panel members, and for those who are streaming in live. My name is Michael Romero, and I'm joined by my co-lead for the study, Jenny Choi. We're from the City Planning Division. We're also joined by our colleagues in urban design, transportation planning, and parks, who have supported city community planning in the development of the study. So we'll be presenting background information on the study and comments received from the panel at our first meeting in December of 2022, and those from the public as well. We'll also be presenting development scenarios and public realm plans that we've produced. We have a development review criteria at the end, which we'll also share. And we'll also be presenting a few questions for the panel. So since the first meeting here before the panel, the team has revised the study vision and the guiding principles and created these development scenarios that we will see today. We have a public realm plan, connections, retail street plans as well too. And the intention is to update the existing Sheppard East subway corridor secondary plan and conform with the growth objectives in the growth plan, including those for major transit station areas. So this team is seeking advice from the panel as we proceed to the next phase of the study. So following council direction to update and refine the secondary plan, staff are looking to implement a new plan for the area. The current secondary plan places a focus on leveraging transit infrastructure, whereas this study is looking for a more comprehensive framework which looks for urban design, parks and open space, public realm, retail, and new connections. So the area has been experiencing an influx of development. The area, and with the graphic we have on the screen, has approximately 26 projects that are under review, approved, or under construction. And these developments represent approximately 13,000 dwelling units. A snapshot of the demographics shows that the study area has been growing within the last 3 census tract data. Looking at the population growth from 2011 to 2021 has been greater than in the rest of the city of Toronto. And the immigration population also been increasing greater than the city of Toronto as well. Looking at figure 3, data shows that household size rates are comparable to the city of Toronto. But one thing we'd like to point out is looking at figure 4 is that intensification in the form of apartment buildings in the form of apartment buildings are driving the growth in the study area. And this represents, as looking at the stats there, nearly double than the rest of the city of Toronto. Now looking at some of the planning policies for the area. So I mentioned major transit station areas. The study area has 3 major transit station areas, those being Bazarian, Bayview, and Leslie. City Council adopted the MTSA policies back in 2022 for the areas. These policies, however, have not yet been adopted by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. A look at the official plan land use for the area. This is the existing map. An important aspect that the team wanted to raise is that what we observed is the adjacencies between stable land uses, those being neighborhoods and apartment neighborhoods, and those for mixed use areas where greater intensification is anticipated. So a site that is adjacent to stable land uses requires transition per the official plan. However, these transitions may be challenged due to lot depths and lot configurations. These adjacent land uses may also result in piecemeal type of development. Through the study, we intend on protecting and encouraging growth in institutional areas, which is the area identified in blue. And by protecting these areas, we would be supporting the existing hospital and healthcare uses as well. So as mentioned, we've heard comments from the design review panel previously, those including a more refined vision that speaks to the area context. We also heard to create a much more human scale connection in the neighborhoods, as the previous plan had a very heavy transit infrastructure approach. And we also heard about optimizing the opportunities for greater connections to parks and new park spaces and open spaces as well. The public has also raised comments such as balancing the need for housing while also minimizing impacts to the street network. We also heard about creating opportunities for more parks and open spaces and connections. And we heard about the Don River Valley system as being an important character in the area. So as mentioned before, we're here presenting a revised vision and guiding principles, among other documents. The vision guiding principles are intended to create a more nuanced framework for the study and place a greater focus on public realm, design, heritage, natural heritage, and looking to leverage existing uses such as healthcare and institutional uses. And the guiding principles are based on 5 guiding principles, looking for a complete, connected, sustainable, prosperous, and livable community. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sadaf.
Hi all, my name is Sadaf Purjavahari from the City Planning Urban Design section. We are all excited to be back with this full in-house study. As Michael mentioned, this work is in progress and there are a number of key issues that we are trying to address. Renew Sheppard East Public Realm Strategy is the focal point for the study area. Public realm big moves creates a shared sense of place that unify the distinct neighborhood and reinforce community identity by enhancing multimodal travel throughout the nodes and neighborhoods, anchor and gateway to create a vibrant retail streets and Sheppard, and also enable great transit corner for placemaking, urban square, and social gathering area. Green Loop that establish a green street network that connects the parks, open space, and natural heritage area offers quite a alternative route to the Sheppard as well. This is to ensure that a new development continue to grow of a public space and new parks. Part of the public realm strategy is to improve connections between neighborhood and nodes to transit, local destination, and existing approved and new parks. Buildings will shape and define the character of our public realm and provide welcoming and inviting pedestrians environment. The question that we are asking ourselves is how we can enhance our public space to lay the groundwork for creative placemaking, and that's where the green loop concept come into place. Our study is really large. After shaping our public realm moves and gather feedback from the public engagement sessions that we had, we are now focusing on the pedestrian experience at the 1 to 50 scales as recommended by panel last time. Our public realm strategy supports a renew vision to create a shared sense of place that unify the distinct neighborhood and reinforce community identity. Our public realm provides a distinguished layer into our design thinking, exploring elements like tree growth, stormwater management, biodiversity, swell, rain garden, and permeable pavers where possible. As mentioned earlier, Sheppard Promenade is an anchor and a spine of the study area that connect all the distinct neighborhood and transit stations. One of our main objectives is to provide and improve a consistent streetscape treatment that provide a welcoming space. With wider setback, we can achieve pedestrian comfort, a retail spillover space, landscaping, and double row of trees where possible, basically to mitigate noise and improve air quality. As development occur, we will have the opportunity to provide additional parkland. Additional parkland will be provided through secure and proposed parkland from current development and future potential acquisition. Priority area for new parkland are indicated in the conceptual park plan and reflect the most suitable locations based on the identified soft side and area where we have a low parkland provision. This is the conceptual plan. Parkland priorities in Sheppard East area include increased parkland supply in areas of low provision, especially around Sheppard and Bayview intersection, where provision is the lowest, basically, and creating and expanding existing parkland in locations that increase walkability and improve the connectivity of the parkland network. Expanding existing parkland and a potential future parkland assemblies of the size, shape, and location suitable for programming as well. Explore opportunity to create a cluster of park, and as we get to the east of the study area, improving and expanding access to ravine area through parks and city land. Now we move on to the public art. We have found it important to identify existing and potential public art locations within the study area. We are aiming to integrate public art into new development, ensuring each piece complement its surrounding as well. Public art can be integrated in a landscape, built form, or be a standalone. To support Renew Sheppard Prosper's community guiding principle, we have identified opportunity to expand retail street close to local and regional transit. To support the expansion of the employment and service use that provide a range of business opportunity that support existing and new residents' daily needs at shorter distance. We advocate for expanding accessibility and convenience that support our multimodal travel and promote sustainable and resilient communities. As you can see in the map, the dark blue line along Sheppard Avenue indicate our priority retail street, and we promote active retail frontage to enliven the streetscape. In addition to that, we also look at opportunity to create a vibrant pedestrian scales retail street to encourage a small scale establishment that indicate in pink color. And we have a questions to ask panel regarding the micro retail. Based on your experience, how we can basically encourage micro retails within the neighborhood in North York. Aside from appropriate retail along the Sheppard Promenade, we also allow fine grain retails within the neighborhood. Phase 2, which we are at, contemplates a redevelopment for 2 different development options to support Renew Connect's community guiding principle. In response to the difference between development option 1 and 2, the network of connections have been slightly varied to match. The purple line indicate existing, blue indicate local street, green shows multi-use trail and mid-block connections. The notable difference between option 1 and 2 are extremely minor, as development option 2 is less expansive. Some streets and mid-blocks were not included, especially in Bayview Node and Bayview Muse Lane. And also in Leslie Node on the northeast corner of the Sheppard and Leslie Street. The cycling network identified the existing network of cycling facilities and trails, as well as proposed major and local cycling route and multi-use trail. Major street cycle routes are intended to be main connection spines of the area and provide safe connectivity to the broader network of the local routes. Local cycling routes and multi-use trails are to provide continuous network of link between major routes. Now I'll hand it over to Jenny to discuss development scenarios.
Thank you, Sadaf. I will be going over the intensification and transition strategy to ensure the growth plan conformity. Renewed Sheppard study directs intensification within the major transit subway areas, also known as MTSA. They are highlighted here in red. This area represents a larger area than the current enforced secondary plan. The existing secondary plan, Sheppard East Subway Corridor, general intensification approach was to identify key development areas while protecting stable neighborhoods in areas that we now call the MTSA. Renewed Sheppard plans for higher levels of density that maximize the size of the area and the number of potential transit users that are within a 10-minute walk of a subway station. These intensification areas include the highest densities closer to the transit stations and corners, highlighted here in dark purple along the highway, which is in dark pink, and lesser intensification in the transition areas, which are in lighter purple and lighter pink shades. The next 2 slides, I will introduce development scenario 1 and development scenario 2, and I will highlight the key differences in built form, which is predominantly in the transition areas. So character area 1 was defined in relationship to existing context, planned context, and proximity to transit. So we see here in pink that these areas are provide for the highest heights with a mix of tall buildings and mid-rise. And we've got also where we can, tall buildings when the lot characteristics permit, tall buildings along the highway. And in the green areas, We plan for intensification, but at a lower scale. And when we do see land assemblies, we do, and we have conceptually imagined lot assemblies in these green spaces, which allows for tall buildings in this character area 1. And you will see that in our models as well. We used 3D modeling techniques to study the 2 scenario options for the built form. This slide provides a visual overview of our first scenario, development scenario 1, which derives from our character area 1. So if you can see here, and I'm going to try to annotate so you can follow along. You can see here that we've got higher intensification along here. Great, thank you. And we imagine taller building typology that extends further from the transit stations. You can see that on Sheppard and also in the interior transition zones and around the Grand Lee and Irvington neighborhood and in the Tulare Drive neighborhood as well. We provide for additional opportunities to extend the street network by providing opportunities for mid-rise development along Fox Warren. We also like to introduce a range of built form and mid-rise buildings next to the neighborhoods along Hollywood, as well as along Maureen. And we also use these opportunities to add new parks, as well as to connect to existing parks along the Clover Crest neighborhood. We've imagined an extension of a street network by providing street opportunities here, creating new parks in a parkland priority area, as well as providing connections to existing parks. We've also, in this scenario, maintained transitions to existing low-rise neighborhoods that are designated neighborhoods which have not been identified as soft sites or sit outside the study area. This slide shows a sectional view of scenario 1 built form on the north side of Sheppard. And as you can see, the tallest buildings are along at the station nodes at Bayview. We've got it at Bessarion and Leslie. And then you will see that the heights of the built form get lower between the tall buildings and the low-rise neighborhoods. So similar to character area 1, character area 2 envisions more intensified character areas, again, along the 3 transit nodes, Bayview, Bessarion, and Leslie. Character area 2, in contrast, incorporates a greater opportunity for mid-rise buildings along Sheppard to maintain an avenue character and an existing mid-rise character that the current enforced secondary plan envisioned on Sheppard. Unlike scenario 1, scenario 2 limits the tall building character areas closer to the transit station and corners. Consistent with character area 2, this slide provides an overview of scenario 2. Scenario 2, again, envisions more mid-rise on Sheppard, and it provides for mid-rise opportunities between the highest heights at the transit station and corners and the highway and neighborhoods. It provides for mid-rise opportunities along Sheppard. You'll see that there is a different building typology as you move away from the transit corners. You will see more mid-rise opportunities in the interior transitional zones at Granley in the Irvington neighborhood, as well as the Talera Drive neighborhood. And further to the north, secondary plan boundary, it also imagines the preservation of existing built form than scenario 1. It maintains the existing built form along Hollywood, along on Sheppard, closer to Sheppard, Protea Gardens, and in the Maureen neighborhood, as well as the neighborhood on the northeast corner at Sheppard and Leslie. Some of these areas do have multiple condo ownership and multiple land ownership that puts them in the long-term planning horizon category, and so they were included in development scenario 1, but not in this scenario. However, despite the differences between both scenarios, they both meet Renew's vision and guiding principles to provide complete, connected, sustainable, prosperous, and livable communities. And in this sectional view, you can see the limits of the tall buildings at the transit corners, and the building typology transitions to mid-rise buildings about 11 stories, as the right-of-way width for Sheppard is 36 meters, a 1-to-1 ratio, moving away from the transit stations along Sheppard.
This slide illustrated tall building typology along Sheppard. Currently, there is no consistent front yard setback on Sheppard. Renew Sheppard encourage a consistent street wall, and where setback patterns are inconsistent, placing base building at the required setback, as shown here, help establish a pedestrian-oriented context, which is our high priority for residents. We aim to improve the public realm along Sheppard through this study and development review alongside the Sheppard Avenue East Complete Street work. Similarly, mid-rise building along Sheppard Avenue are required to provide front facade angular plane above 80% of the right-of-way to create a pedestrian-oriented streetscape. These step back help mitigate the perceptions of the height from the street and ensure sunlight and sky view on the opposite sidewalk. Additional height that exceed the right-of-way width will require additional step backs.
Just wanted to raise my hand for a moment. You have a minute left, but I see you probably have more slides than a minute will take. How much more time do you need?
I think 1 minute would be enough.
1 minute will be enough? Okay.
Try
And
to.
that'll be the entire presentation?
Oh,
Or
2,
do you
3
think?
minutes.
Okay.
Maybe.
Let me give you 5 more minutes. How's that sound?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. From this slides, we will see the 3 conceptual, basically the structural plan and 3D maps for the redevelopment and public realm enhancement around 3 nodes. This is a Bayview major transit station. The focus is on creating the high-density mixed-use community that integrate new residential, commercials, and transit use. We aim to preserve the existing character by promoting a smooth transition in building form toward the surrounding neighborhood. The sectional diagram compare the build form and transition in both scenarios and illustrate relationship to the existing and planned context. As shown here, both scenarios account for the active applications within the area while providing a progressive transition and scale down toward the surrounding neighborhood, parks, and open space. Similar to Bayview Node, Bazarian Node is designed as a mixed-use character area with tall building contemplated at and around transit corners. A mix of tall building and mid-rise building is strategically located between the Highway 401 and Sheppard Avenue. Compared to Bayview character area, which is mainly residential commercials, Bazarian area served as a center of civic activity with at-grade retails, community facilities, and parks. As mentioned before, built form transition is a key factor in forming the building envelope across the transit node and along neighborhood adjacencies. Bezerian Station present a unique opportunity for transition in both scenarios. The lots have appropriate depth to accommodate different building typology and provide enough room for rear transition. As you can see in this section, there are great variation in form. The massing descent toward the neighborhood to the north and ascent toward the Highway 401. Leslie Node emerged as an institutional activity center within the study area, and it offers significant potential for lot consolidations, enabling the establishment of complete community within the large parcel. The Leslie area presents a connectivity challenge due to the rail track that basically bisect the community, limiting opportunity for connecting between the two parcels. Also, grading is another challenge in this area, but through some applications review, we are trying to leverage the grade and enhance the streetscape. Renew study team develop a performance standard that inform and shape our model shown in development scenario 1 and 2. I'll pass it to Michael to finish up with the development review criteria.
Great, thank you, Sadaf. So through the development of our 2 scenarios, we've also produced a review criteria to assess both of the options from a qualitative but also quantitative perspective, considering some of the constraints and opportunities that we heard from the first review panel meeting, also the feedback that we've heard from the community. These scenarios were based on the 5 guiding principles that we have established through or created at this point through the study area, through the study, and also the performance measures as well that was shared on the slide previously, the development review scenarios, and also the public realm retail street plans that we've been presenting as well today too. We've also presented this material to the public in our recent public meeting just a couple of weeks ago. And the intention is at this point to refine the project towards a more preferred option and then go back to the community for further feedback on that option. And as mentioned, the development review criteria with the 5 criteria, complete community, which the criteria which we have here on the screen is broken up into the 5 criteria, but also scored on 3 metrics, whether the criteria best meets the vision and guiding principles, whether the criteria moderately meets it, and then the last one being if the scenario least meets the vision and guiding principles. And as noted here, the complete community, livable community. Oops, sorry, just a little delay. Connected community, prosperous community, and sustainable community. Now, we've developed these criteria in collaboration with our internal partners, and we will continue to revise it as we continue to proceed through a preferred scenario. Now, so that actually brings us to the conclusion of our presentation, and where we have a couple questions which we have for the panel. The questions here on the screen, but I can, Gordon, I can put it now to you as we've concluded our presentation in terms of like the next steps for the panel member responses.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I'm just checking to make sure. Yes, these that are on the slide right now are ones that have already been shared with the panel members. So we'll take those into consideration as we go through for discussion. First of all, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive presentation. And we're going to move on, panel members, now to questions of clarification. So this is questions, not actually getting into the discussion itself, but actually asking questions to clarify the intent of the study that we're looking at. And Juhi, I see you have your hand up, so we'll start with you.
Thank you. Could you just provide a bit of clarification on the characteristic of the green loop? The green loop, I'm just wondering, when I look at all the map, it really appears that is really like a secondary street with full right of ways and a sidewalk. Like, I guess if you could elaborate a little bit what the green loop is supposed to look like what it's supposed to include as sort of a design feature. Thank you.
Sure. Can I provide response now? There are many existing traditional pedestrian connection in the neighborhood that people attempt to use in the community already. The green loop is a concept and is our goal to basically improve and provide continuous connection approach throughout the study area for pedestrian mainly, and also enhancing landscaping as well.
And one more thing I'd like to add to SADAF is that we'd like to create a distinct alternate route as well, a quieter route than Sheppard with additional green park-like characters that not only provide a good pedestrian environment, but also connects to all the parks and open spaces as SADAF had mentioned earlier in her presentation.
Okay. Juhi, does that answer your question? Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on next to Paul. Paul, you're off mute now.
A question around the Bayview Mall redevelopment. It's sort of grayed out and missing, but it's kind of central. Can you just talk about where that's at? What's proposed there? Has there been some kind of settlement around heights, densities, use, any of that?
Yeah, of course. So in the graphics that we provided, we've highlighted in one of the character areas as like of the Bayview Mall, like Bayview Mall site. There has been a couple approvals on the site at closer to the intersection. I believe it's about in the 30s range, and then to the rear of the mall on Bayview Muse, there's been a couple mid-rise developments that were approved as well too. So there's been some development activity that has been secured there for the previous developments, but because the mall in itself represents one landowner, we have identified it as a standalone character area, which we'd be refining on a much more site-specific basis.
Okay, Paul, does that answer your question?
Somewhat. So I guess can you tell us where you're at with that planning for the mall, or what the vision for it is? Because it seems like it's not being integrated at this point. Or will we have a chance to review that as well?
The challenge of sometimes our study is that as we are developing the planning framework, there are development applications that are going through OLT, that are going through development review and getting approved. So this is one of those sites. However, we have had some wins on this site where there is 2 towers on Sheppard that have been approved by the OLT, a couple mid-rise on the north local street, some on-site park land, and some hence social gathering public realm piece along the Sheppard frontage, quite elaborate enhanced public realm element on site for the Bayview Village area. So it does provide for supporting and enhancing some of those placemaking areas that we that also support special places that residents have identified. So we do, although it has been approved at the OLT, it has achieved some of renewed Sheppard's vision and guiding principles to add public realm pieces and social gathering areas.
And I might just add that in the presentation material, Paul, in the 3D massing, for example, those built form elements and the public park are actually shown. So it is there, some of the approved massing within the slides, just to provide some clarification. There are elements, the mall is still remaining, and there's still elements of surface parking around the mall, and the applications are currently in site plan.
Okay. Paul, do you have any other questions, or does that answer your
Yeah, thank you.
comment. Okay, that sounds great. Michael, I know you've had some tech challenges. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Gordon.
Okay.
Back. And maybe the question's been answered. In the general diagramming that you did, there was a big pink area near the which I assume to be sort of mixed use. I guess that would be on the Bayview side in plan, but in 3D, it was always shown as an empty site. Maybe that was just a misunderstanding from me about that. If you don't mind going to your diagrams, just trying to understand how that large area, there we go. Yeah, so if you immediately north and east of the subway stations, I guess at Bayview and Sheppard. That's not Bayview, sorry. Okay, then go all the way to the left. That would be not there. Just move your cursor to the right, please. Yeah, we're looking for a street name at the intersection of.
Sorry, looking at so just maybe some clarification. So we can just move along from south to north. So this site that's empty is the Housing Now site.
Got it.
And yeah, because right now, I mean, it's still in the works in terms of a concept. We have left it blank because that background kind of modeling is still underway.
Yeah.
We did, because of that, though, we did identify in the development activity slide. Sorry, I apologize. My screen is, of course, lagging a little bit. We identified, yeah, here we go. We identified as the Housing Now site. Now, if you're also asking for this area at the intersection of Leslie and Sheppard, because I know this area is blank.
I was wrong, and I'm actually referring to the left side of the screen now. And is that Bessarion?
Oh, this area over here.
So it's a large blank area. I'm sorry. I wish I could. My screen. I'm trying to get my materials back together again. If you zoom in to the center left, keep going. I'm sorry. This is awkward. Right there. That development where oh no, that was my cursor.
No, sorry. So this blank area over here.
Nope. I keep going to the west, please.
West.
Keep going west. And you've got the Bayview Avenue. You've got if you go north immediately east of the Bayview Avenue developments that are applications, you've got a big blank site.
Are you referring to this blank site on the mall? Because
yes.
There's a couple. Okay, yes. So I think this speaks to the question earlier. We have a couple sites that have been approved on the mall site, such as this one over here, 2901, and this one over as well, 2901 as well too. But this as being like a large individual landowner, like we haven't at this stage contemplated redevelopment models for this, as the intention is to work with this site on a more individual basis. There are a couple other sites which I'll note as well too, where I'm just going to quickly refer to the massing model. These sites over here, we've also left blank as well too, because being such large individual sites, the intention in an eventual secondary plan would apply for more site-specific policies that would coordinate for the development standards of those larger sites.
So maybe just as a point of clarification, and maybe I can extend this into my comments later, but if the intent is to represent a complete neighborhood with street edges and park connectivity and so on, is there just, there's an intent not to overstep the city's ability to comment on this particular site because it represents 20% of the entire frontage on Sheppard, and I just wondered if there could be some way to include a representation of the principles. And maybe you've given me the answers, but it stands out as as a gap. So, but maybe the answer you've given is sufficient for me at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from panel members? Paul.
Yeah, I was inspired by Michael's looking around on the map. Maybe if we could just go back to that same plan that we just had, the aerial view. I'm curious because there's a property on the right of that image. I believe it's immediately west of Leslie, and it was something we saw at the panel, I believe, the Creatio site, which is shown as a blank site, across from the hospital. That's also proposed for, I can't remember, it was 4 or 5 or a series of towers, correct?
So at this point, there's an intention. Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, there is an intention to develop the site by the city, and there is a number of units that will be secured for the site. But again, because internally it's going through its own process through Housing Now, the intention was to not so much not recognize that development is going to happen. We recognize that development is going to happen, but we didn't want to represent it at this point, given that exercise of revising the concept was still in the works.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that Housing Now, which is primarily on city-owned land, earmarks these pieces of land for affordable housing. So they have to achieve a certain amount of affordable housing. And so what we have been told is that there are other Creatio housing sites that have taken higher priority. And so when the Housing Now development of this site continues or restarts, and that consultation piece happens and occurs with the local residents, that's when Housing Now would like to provide a development plan here. And so that consultation has not occurred. And so we would just like to identify as a Housing Now site.
I realize I'm getting into commentary territory, but that site is much more real than a number of the sites that have been modeled here that are privately owned by people that have not necessarily participated in anything. So I think it's a little bit difficult to review when we're missing, whatever it was, 1,000, 2,000 units, but then we're seeing mid-rise deep into neighborhoods that are much more speculative. So that's just, I think, a bit of a, I'll leave it as a comment and say it's something to consider. I'm sure there's a myriad of reasons why we're here in that form.
Yeah, I think Paul, it's a good comment. If you could hold on to that for the discussion period, I think that I want to make sure that one gets through. I'm not seeing any other hands coming up. I just have a couple of questions. I know we're taking a bit more time on the questions of clarification, but you've shared a lot of information with us, and we want to make sure that we're understanding it clearly and that it has all the information in it that we need in order to be able to give you input. In the notion about, I think it's called identity. There we go. Identity and character. Just a couple of questions. Have you come to the point, excuse me, where you'd be layering on things like the social character of these different neighborhoods, and also as an example, would say an Indigenous heritage mapping also be part of your scope? And this question is related to how you approach identity and character, and what are the tools that you're using in order to gain a full sense of what each of these areas within this study zone are all about.
So I'm not sure, Jenny, if you were referring to this. Yeah.
Yes. So what our approach in identifying the community assets in the area is one of feedback from the community. We had asked at multiple consultation meetings, what was special to you? What was something that a building that you would like to preserve. What are the important destinations that you would like to maintain and protect? And so those areas were from direct feedback, direct comments from the community and identified by the community. And so those local features that we wanted to support and enhance were areas that were identified for the community. In terms of, we know that there is a Wendet site that is just south of the study area, and consistent with the official plan policies chapter, chapter 1, we've got to look at our scope of work through the equity lens, but also that we know the city's got a commitment to the reconciliation action plan. So our team had it in recognizing that there is a moat field that is associated with the Wendet community, that we wanted to ensure that that we would consult with any First Nation treaty and territorial partners, or urban Indigenous organizations, and we had gone through that process of initiating that engagement strategy. We consulted with our city's Indigenous Urban Affairs Office, and we will also wanted to create a similar approach for our special places that residents had identified. We wanted to provide that opportunity to the Indigenous groups and identify if there was any historical or significant places that were of Indigenous significance. And what the outcome was that is that through the current Indigenous engagement strategy through the community center, which is the Edenona Wastina Community Center, that through that process, they are actively engaging with the urban Indigenous groups, and they are looking to partner and explore some on-site programming and placemaking opportunities. And so that is how we have incorporated and considered significant areas, or areas that we'd like to highlight as important in the area, and we're working through that existing process, if I answered your question correctly.
Okay. Well, thank you for the update on that. I think what we're going to do now is move from questions and into actual commentary from panel members. So panel members, I know, let's see, we have, I believe, 5 of us, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you could each, I'd say, take maybe 5 minutes each, self-manage your time. And we'll start with comments, and I'm going to suggest the following order. I'll start with Eladia, then Juhi, Paul, Jessica, and then Michael. So Eladia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Now, there's a really powerful assessment tool for land use planning that's been in use in this region since time immemorial. So I'll just describe it in very brief detail. You can look more into it. There are some resources, and I'd be happy to have an offline conversation about it as well. So in brief, that land use assessment tool is the 4 layers of existence. So whenever we do anything important, we assess how it is affecting under soil and underwater creatures, so the health of water and soil. This is accomplished, well, I'll go through the rest of the layers. So the next layer is all of those creatures that go about on the land. So that includes humans and other land-based creatures. Then we have those creatures that move about in the air. So that would include considering the movement of climatic phenomena, the movement of atmospheric water, birds, and other air-based creatures, the health of the air itself. Finally, we have a feeling of connection to the celestial realm, how our interventions connect to a wider understanding of cosmos. So this is one tool that is very powerful when it's used, and I would encourage you to consider it in the assessment tool that we're using to assess the value of larger development initiatives. So one of the ways to support the interconnection of these 4 levels of existence, which all serve to support human life, is by creating literal physical connectivity between habitat zones. So, for example, when I look at Elkhorn Drive there, are there ways of, for example, recognizing developers who may be able to form long linear connections to leverage the richness of the ravine habitat and start to knit those together under the soil, over the soil, taking into consideration air quality and the heat island effect to mitigate those using regenerative habitats that are physically connected underground and overground and the canopy of the trees. This will really help regenerate habitats for other than human life, which in turn enhances human life. So I'd love to see sort of more of that, more targeted and more explicit in the assessment tool. I'd also like to see a more concerted effort to physically interconnect those green zones. Perhaps developers could be positively assessed if they are making available to future tenants and future residents tools to enhance biodiversity and resilience of plant communities, animal communities, by making them aware of invasives to remove on their properties, native plants that may be endangered and could be accessed via seed banks. So I know Six Nations and MCFN both keep seed banks of native plants that are frequently rare. What we have not seen is nurseries take up those seed banks and really start a concerted effort to start making these available to your average landscaper, your average resident. I tried to find native plants for my little yard and couldn't do it. I saw a lot of invasives and a lot of Asiatic plants from other regions for sale in the the average Canadian Tire or even Harper's or even these places where we get landscaping plants. So if the developer can take on some of that educational component, and perhaps there's a concerted effort at transferring that knowledge to residents so that they can support on their little properties those biodiversity efforts, I think it'll enrich this habitat for everyone. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the intensification efforts. I think that's really my major concern is how are we supporting the strength of the water, how are we supporting the healthfulness of the air and supporting all of those other features who often get forgotten in the assessment tools, but we really, really need them. And because our development strategies as human beings have been so thoughtless when it comes to those other supporting life systems, we have to concertedly and deliberately foster regenerative activities now to support those habitats in an urban environment, because there's this perception that urban environments can't support life. They can. We've just developed them in a way that they don't. So I think perhaps be very explicit about the length of habitat zones, the types of plants we should be fostering, and the water health efforts, so that we have an interconnected, even though perhaps we have separate properties with separate tenants, they're all working towards this common goal when it comes to biodiversity and resilience. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to move on next to Juhi.
Thank you. It's my first time seeing this study. I really appreciate the effort that's been put into such a complicated site. I live just north west of the study area for a very long time, so it's interesting to see what the city is trying to wrangle in. I think page 16 of the document had a really great guiding principle for the community. I think, again, being such a complicated site, we can achieve everything. I really encourage you to zone into the guiding principle and do those really, really well. I almost will even challenge you whether you have too many. Like if you were to pick only 3 bullet points from the principles which are to be prioritized on the site, that will become non-negotiable vision for the study area. Because I think there's so many colliding things happening here. And I just use those principles to look at your questions. For the public realm, definitely, I think the canopies, the shade should be integrated. But I think what's really interesting is that I wonder if a stormwater management study has been done for the whole community. There's incredible density that will be added, which will reduce existing permeable sites. And as you know, the Toronto Green Standard had to pull back on what it was asking each development to tackle on site for stormwater management. It was because each individual property lines doesn't have enough open areas to provide appropriate stormwater measures. So if the city understands where the water needs to go for the entire site, I think that will inform in turn what needs to get included in the public realm, whether the network of open space area have enough for the community to deal with that as well, so that we're not just expecting each site to tackle it individually. So just in terms of resilience for the community, I think that's something we should look at. I wonder about the green loop as well. Sheppard Street itself is so highly congested from bus, subway, and cars, and I think the green loop, as you are intending, will provide the much needed relief for the community that needs to get away from the congestion, that just need places to walk. Right now, it's not clear if the green loop will provide a continuous connection for the cars as well. I think the intended users for the community has to be really prioritized for the green loop for it to be successful. So it doesn't really become another congested area where the cars are just trying to go around and avoid the baby shepherd nodes, so that the pedestrian are just walking along the cars instead of a green corridor. So again, it's just something that I want to understand better. And in terms of that connectivity, again, maybe to look at beyond the site, there is a really great trail right now that starts from Yonge and Empress area in North York that moves southeast to the Sheppard, all the way to the Sheppard East Park, which is just south on the west boundary of your study area. And there's actually a lot of people that actually use that trail to get away from the density of North York. And it would be really interesting to, again, the green loop to actually connect that on. Like people usually stop at that park and go back home. So again, like, is there sort of a bigger connectivity that you can create beyond just a study site? I think it's something that would, again, provide relief beyond just what you're serving here. I think that's what I'll focus on for sustainability and resiliency. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Juhi. Excuse me, moving on to Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Gord. I'm going to start by saying that what you're trying to do is really hard. Like taking these sort of post-war suburban areas that have billions of dollars and decades of investment focused around the car and committed to that, and the infrastructure follows, everything follows that mode, and then to kind of urbanize it and shift it is a massive challenge, because you've got a kind of sunk cost and a sunk cost fallacy in our minds, and so shifting that is very, very difficult, and it's already halfway done, and so you're kind of inheriting a kind of project as it's midway through. And I think we have to be also at the same time honest with ourselves about what's possible, and what the place is, and then what it could be. And part of that, I find we sometimes fall into the trap of taking best practices, that like the mid-rise guidelines that are based on a kind of 18.5, 60-foot wide right of way, 6 stories equals good, and then extrapolating it into this condition. and it doesn't translate on a 36-meter right-of-way, and it falls apart when you add an extra 10 meters to the building face. And I think we have to be honest about what this place is and then build from there. And I think the vision statement is a sort of starting point, and I think Eladia's maybe sort of encouragement to maybe zoom out and kind of think about the broader systems in play is another good place to start. The vision statement is rather generic, I'd say. There's a lot of kind of checking policies and frameworks in the official plan, and I know you need something that's defensible at the OLT, but it also needs to be rooted in the place. And I think we need to find something that is less about the objective of creating a walkable street and the reality that Sheppard is a 36-meter wide right of way with a whole lot of cars and truck traffic. And then how do we make that walkable? What does walkable in that context look like? And it's not a kind of simple extrapolation of mid-rise guidelines that were developed for an 18.5 meter 60-foot right of way and just stretching them. And so I think wherever possible, measure things, measure the topography, figure out what it is, and then be honest about what's possible. Compare it to real built versions of these things. Go to the corner of Dufferin and Lawrence, stand in front of the buildings there that are on a 36-meter right of way with 8 stories, and feel what that public realm feels like, and then think about how an even wider right of way is going to feel here on Sheppard. Go to the corner of Weston south of Steeles where there's 10 stories on a 36-meter right of way, and think about how that feels, and then think about how your dimensions are different and what the impact of those differences are. And I think we need to be honest about what these places are and develop a unique set of tools, a unique set of public realm responses that is rooted in that existing condition. I think we need to be honest about kind of the retail that we can imagine, micro retail, and a lot of the precedents are great, and we've got a lot of precedents from Yorkville and Ossington, but that doesn't translate into a new building where their construction costs are X hundreds of dollars a square foot, and they're going to lease it out to the biggest bank, and they have to accommodate a type G loading dock in behind. We need to be kind of honest about what that is and look to examples like North York, when some of the 80s condos along Yonge Street that have those hyper small micro retail spaces, and think about how we can physically create the conditions to replicate that. Built form modeling, I think, needs to be tested through a realistic approach to assembly. A lot of the sort of mid-rise areas that are in the existing neighborhoods show sort of uniform, perfectly assembled, exactly 60 meter to 80 meter frontage assemblies per the guidelines, laid out in perfect courtyards. I think the reality is someone's going to assemble just the bare minimum to squeeze a tall building on, and you're going to get an application for a 30-story tower, and they're going to challenge you at the OLT, and then you're going to have bungalows beside it. And I think we need to be honest about that eventuality and prepare ourselves. Are there ways to look at 6 stories that are a single site next to a bungalow, next to a mid-rise, next to a thing, and what does that really look like? How do we prepare for that? What are the policies necessary to protect for all those possible eventualities? I think Juhi or others maybe talked about the greenways as well, and I think looking at the topography and the existing ravine trails along the edge and that kind of conditions that exist, how do we maybe beg, borrow, and steal those existing ones as much as possible, and then be very strategic in where we introduce new things? The plan and those green loops depend a lot on a lot of property acquisitions from what I could see, even where you're kind of strategically just connecting things. And so, just working on similar studies at the city where even acquiring a single house to connect something is beyond what Parks is capable of. I think we have to, again, find ways to be really strategic about where we're investing those kinds of efforts to create that loop. And if we can piggyback on an existing network, let's do that. So I think the real comment here is to ground things in physical realities. Take what you've drawn, find the comparable in the elsewhere in the city, walk it yourselves, and then sort of adjust accordingly and do that sort of through the various layers, because I think that there's a risk that this becomes a sort of policy exercise that's not rooted in the place, and we get a lot more of the same, a lot of OLT hearings and a lot of kind of defensible stuff, and then a lot of stuff that slips through the cracks. And so where possible, let's be very real and true to what it is today, and then what it could be, and hopefully in the future. So not to be a Debbie Downer, but I do think that there is a unique character to North York and these suburban municipalities, and I think we need to create the designs that respond to those conditions.
Great, thank you, Paul. Going to move on to Jessica and then Michael.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation of this very interesting and needed study. When I look at studies like this, I always ask myself, what are the tools we have, the ability to use, and a lot of those were presented today, things like built forms, setbacks, green streets, parks. And it always makes me wonder about sort of the role of POPs and how they can be used as a tool. And I think that the definition of POPs right now is it's sort of just one thing, but I think in a way POPs could be developed into different typologies and used more strategically based on how they can function, in this case, to assist you in realizing your public realm vision. So for instance, the mid-block connections you mentioned could be POPs connections. There could be identity POPs that are located in special areas in the heart of some of these distinct neighborhoods. Each type of POPs could have a particular function or role. You could have expansion POPs that could be, long, relatively narrow strips of land along private property that help to widen the feeling of the right of way and maybe allow for a second row of trees to be planted or an additional softscape for infiltration. So I was just looking at other ways, because your green loop idea is it could be really strong. It's just how do you actually get it to work and get it to connect? So that was just one of the thoughts that I was having. The idea of alternative routes for pedestrians was mentioned during the presentation and questions, and that also makes me wonder if there's a series of sort of micro loops that are needed, essentially loops that come off of Sheppard into the sort of distinct areas and then back out to Sheppard. I think the sort of pedestrian circulation through this area, might not always be focused on Sheppard or the loop. There might be other areas of focus. And then for the question of identity creation, it's really tricky, because identity, more often than not, is something that evolves over time. And so I'd almost like to see more of an analytical map of the existing identity zones and features that have been recognized by the existing community, and sort of how that overlays with the development scenarios you've presented. And then you can sort of analyze, what makes them distinct from each other. And that might help to start to inform the moves to be made to sort of target the evolution of identity in this area. I don't think we can sort of stamp an area and say this area is going to be this thing. So I think maybe a deeper look into the sort of the cultural history of the place and how that can then result in sort of built form changes would be nice to see. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So many insightful things already said. What to add to that? Maybe to begin with, the study represents all, and I strongly support it. Represents all the values that we want to bring to the neighborhoods that we're working in. To me, after repeated readings of the study, I see how, in the context of existing and planned and imagined circumstances, that there needs to be a kind of a knitted approach to bringing complete communities in this period and in the anticipated rapid growth. So I see all of our values, you know, all those of us who are making the city, planning the city, embodied in it. So I can't support it enough. So on the subject of of some of the actual diagramming, I would say, as I maybe tried to express in some of my questions, if the intent is to recognize that Sheppard has a very inhospitable pedestrian environment, and that the intent is to fulfill those streetscape diagrams that are in the report, when I look at the 3D models, I can't see them. I can't see it expressed there right now. And in the Bayview and Sheppard intersection, I know it's complicated, but maybe there is a way of expressing the intent to address the inhospitability, you know, first by continuous street walls, then by intense tree planting, so that the intent is there. But right now, the 3D modeling, with that significant gap seen on the north side of Sheppard, doesn't speak out right now very loudly about that. And I know that we're supposed to apply the streetscape and understand that it's there. But if you're looking for something that persuades, I would say it needs a little bit of work. The second thing is this question that some of us were asking, which is about existing proposed, imagined as supporting a master plan or a secondary plan, and then omitted because for politics. I'm assuming that's what it is. So those four categories are hard for us to imply in the diagram. You know, a big emission on the I'm looking on, you know, built form scenario 2. Big emission on the southwest corner, big emission on the northeast corner, and yet we know that the values that are part of the setting out of the vision and the guidelines are there, but with those pieces representing, even if they're shaded, if they're implied, representing the ultimate goal in my view maybe isn't as clear as it could be. I'm also looking at an aerial view of the site right now, and the landscape surrounding the extension of the river valley around the north edge of the site and on the east edge of the site, you know, it's a very rich landscape, and the green loops that you're looking to fulfill, for the most part, the trees are already there, right? There's a very well-established tree canopy, you know, on the north side of Sheppard in those existing residential neighborhoods, and most of them you're not really touching. So there's the intensity of the landscape, the intensity of the existing green canopy, that's a real asset to that community, and retaining that to the best of planning's ability would mean that, you know, a lot of work's already done for you. So I would say that emphasizing the quality and character and richness of the existing green space, in some cases wilderness, in other cases mature street trees, is something that will reinforce what you're looking for. I would say that in the context of a very uncertain future for street retail, and we all hope that it will recover, but none of us really know that it will recover, and when it recovers, what it'll look like. I would say that the treescape on streets becomes even more important in terms of providing an environment where pedestrians and families and strollers and bicyclists feel as though their needs, the shade and sidewalk space, is acknowledged. And so I know we talked about it in the pre-meeting briefing, but the idea that such an intensity of development is matched with a public realm intervention at its scale, not just the wonderful wilderness ravine network to the north, but also on Sheppard Avenue itself, would seem to me to be something to aspire to. And I know that there are other studies taking place, but if those studies could prioritize on the north sides of the street the anticipation of sidewalk use with even wider sidewalks, maybe more than double rows of trees, something that has it read as though in plan and in diagramming as a linear park that could help address the harsh sun that's coming our way and as a result of climate change, maybe the reduced use of personal vehicles, and something that again works at the scale that is being proposed here in terms of density and new residents seeing this as home and seeing the street as a place that you can rely on for shade and for community. So it would be a linear community, a linear park serving as a community center, to try to put words together. Gordon, maybe I'll stop there. There've been so many other good things said. I commend you for taking on this incredibly challenging situation, and I inspire you to continue to find ways of diagramming it in a way that can represent the solution as well as the complexity. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to all the panel members for the comments, and then also back to the city team who have clearly spent a lot of time on this project. I think what happens for us as a panel is that when we first started back in 2007, we would see the developments and the studies that would come our way, and over time we began to realize that the ones that really had some depth to them were the ones that had a story, and not just a story of a manufactured story where you just pick a few photographs and say, I'm hoping it'll look like this, but then the diagrams belie that and actually are something different. And in this particular case, I think as panel members, we're having a hard time getting a true sense of the underlying story or series of stories of this study area, because we have a feeling that this study area is not homogeneous. I don't know if that's the right word. It's not all the same. There are probably a whole cluster of different communities within this that we don't even have aren't even able to imagine or gain access to in this considerable amount of work that you've done. And that, I think, if you don't have that, then you need it in order to be able to, forget about presenting to us, but for you to be able to grasp, as panel members have indicated, the treasures that may be there already. And many panel members have talked about green space and shade trees as an example, and we can use that for a moment. Even mapping out tree cover and where green space is beyond where the big patches of green are right now would tell a story. If there are other attributes, I think it's almost like you need to back up in order to be able to go forward. And I think that's really important. I'm not trying to take anything away from what you've done. The work that you've done is really good, but now it needs to, how can I put it? If many of them are based on policy and based on standards and things like that, do that. Set it aside. Now really dig into these areas and pull up the information. And part of it, again, as an example, could be the green. You talk about a green loop. Panel members have talked about that. They find that intriguing. Now you go back into the neighborhoods as they are and pull up in a mapping of what is actually green in that area right now. And I think that's the issue that we're grappling with right now, and we sort of sense that you're grappling with that too. And that really needs to be done, because otherwise we may all miss the boat here in terms of helping this area transform itself in a good way, in a really good way. And I think that's what all panel members are indicating here. Right now, we're not sure we have enough information from you to be able to tell us and convince us that what we're seeing is actually the right way to go. And I'm trying not to make it hard, because you are clearly all passionate about this, and this is clearly really important. This is a really important part of the city. It has all the attributes and the challenges as a microcosm of all those that need to be addressed. So I'm hoping that this will come back to us often. This is a study that it won't be done justice if we see it twice or maybe 3 times. This needs to come back to us again so we can start to see what's happening. And we'd be happy to provide more information. If you have questions back to us, ask us. We'll do our best. And I think some of that information is already coming through in the comments that are going to be coming through here, coming back to you in terms of the minutes. But we're seriously interested in this. And this is a serious part of the city that we need to do right. You've got to start. You've got more to do. So thank you very much. I think that's it for this afternoon. And I know I can see some faces on the screen that are going, well, what do we do now?
No, we've got it.
You've got it. Yes, you got it. I mean, you are all very talented and you have the ability to do it, but you've got a wild one here, and you got to dig into it and pull up the information that's hidden currently, that I think might just, as panel members have indicated, might give you some aha moments, and all of a sudden the story starts to come together. And it may not be a single story, it may be a collection of stories, and they may not all be the same. But that would, if you could capture that and take advantage of that, then you've got something that's going to have real value for this area. That's it. I'll shut up now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
And enjoy the
Thank you,
rest of the
everyone.
day. I'm sure the heat is waiting for us.